Hello, everyone. Welcome to Design Strategy 2020. As you may know, my name is Stephanie DeRosso. I'll do a little introduction on myself in a minute. Basically, Design Strat, I think, has been running for a little while now. I've taken this course, I think, for the last 3 years. I think it is 3 years now. It's gone through a few iterations in that time, so this is probably the latest, I'd say the best version, but we're always open to feedback, obviously at the end of the course. So a little bit of a overview of how we've structured this subject. The aim of it is to be quite practical. So that said, it's going to be very fast paced. There's a lot of work to do. You're going to feel like you're not going to have enough time to do everything. And that is entirely the point, because we're trying to simulate the real world and real life scenarios as much as possible in this subject. It was probably in previous iterations a little bit more theoretical and a little bit denser on the theory and I guess the systemic type of thinking, which you'll still get in the subject as we move through. But having realized that actually, strategy like design is best experience. It's one of those hard, fuzzy things to kind of wrap your head around until you actually kind of get into it and have someone to help you kind of guide through it. So, trying to keep it very practical, very fast paced. And yeah, that's pretty much the ethos behind the subject. So what I might do is I'm actually keen to just do a quick round of introductions with everyone before I end up landing on myself. I try to not talk about myself as much as possible. So this will be, the tutes are definitely designed to be student-led. So it's more of a discussion. Think of it as being exactly the same as if you're in the classroom, except that we can see everyone's living rooms or kitchen in my case. So I really want you to come to class with questions, with topics that you're grappling with, creating that discussion amongst each other. It really shouldn't be a lecture just, of me talking every time, although that sometimes does happen. So definitely try and keep the balance between me talking and you talking generally. So, alrighty. So on my screen, I'm just going to go clockwise from what I can see. So right next to me, I've got Cameron Morgan. So maybe just a brief introduction around your level of experience in design, because I know we've got different degrees of experience here, as well as a little bit on your experience in perhaps strategy as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron. This is my third MDF unit. So I'm an educational media producer with the University of Queensland. So my background is actually more in terms of content production, so video and audio. My undergraduate was in music production and business. So there's an element of strategy that I got in through that way. And I've come from the wonderful world of branding. So that was what I was doing before I came into the higher education space. So my experience with design is, it's a bit mixed. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Up next, Ali.
Hi, I'm Ali. I've been working as a designer and art director for about 15 years. Most recently, probably about the last 5 years in teaching design in higher education settings. I've just got a couple of units left in MDF before I start my PhD at ANU. I do have some experience in design strategy, but it's been quite varied. So crossing over from advertising strategy and strategic planning a little bit to design strategy and comm design strategy. So yeah, that's me.
Cool. Thank you. Libby.
Hey, so I work currently for the federal government. I am the Human-Centered Design Academy lead at BizLab Academy, which is an innovation lab in the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science. I've been there 6 months. Before that, I was an experienced design strategy lead for a digital agency for about 11 and a half years. Well, actually about 8 and 3 years as a front-end web developer. But I come from a design background. I came from art education and design many, many years ago, too long ago. Yeah, so I've been doing it a while.
Great. Okay, Tim.
Hey, Tim Hogan. This is my third unit for MDF. I have some experience in design, kind of listening to everyone in this course, I feel like I have no experience in design. But in terms of design strategy, pretty light on there. But I'm really excited about kind of from the reading that I've done in this. Pretty excited to get into it because it's something that I'm looking at in my current role.
Thanks. Okay, Shia.
It's actually pronounced Shay, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry. I was going to ask.
Okay. But I've had a day where people are calling me all different things today. I got called Grant. I'm like, clearly I'm not Grant, but that's okay. This is my second unit. I'm probably a little bit different to everybody else. I have pretty much no experience in design. I'm a paramedic, but I've moved into a different role in community engagement. So looking at different ways to deliver service and things like that. So it's all pretty new. I've got to do a lot of Googling. So
great. Yeah. Awesome. Brendan.
Shay, you don't stop Googling. I can let you in on that secret. So I'm Brendan. This is my second subject. My experience around design is actually largely around design leadership. I've been the head of design at a couple of different places. And I'm doing this course because I really want mastery of all these other areas of design that I didn't pick up because I didn't do an undergrad in design. Did an undergrad in law and then kind of fell into design through program delivery. So I guess I'm really keen to learn everything that I don't yet know. I know enough to know that I know virtually nothing.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Brendan. Anthony. We can't hear you. Not coming through.
Hold on.
There you go.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yep.
Awesome. Yep, so I'm Anthony. I've been a UX UI designer for about 6-7 years, but I'm transitioning more in that experience design sort of sector. I'm really getting involved in that. With strategy, not so much, but I'm really eager to learn around it. I think I've got a little bit of knowledge, but I really just want to sort of get right into it and really get into the nitty gritties. I'm just interested in sort of moving forward, planning out the future of a design space in an industry or in a business and sort of growing it and moving on from there as well.
Cool. Last but not least, India.
Hey everyone. Hi, especially to Brendan, who we share. This is not our first time at the rodeo. We did design strategy at Swinburne to start off with together, and then we swapped over. My background in design is starting at Swinburne a few years ago and then deferring it once I got a role in a design studio. That studio was more kind of brand design. And now I'm working in a different studio in the city and it's still brand design. It's more of a corporate space. And I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to move away from brand, which can sometimes feel quite superficial, especially if you're a consulting studio coming in to give people a new strategically designed image that they should project. And often you don't get to follow on with them to see how they realize that on a substantial level through the way they behave and what they're actually doing. So I'd like to be moving more into kind of like organizational design or design that feels more than just surface level.
Awesome. Okay, great. So it seems like a really good mix in terms of expertise in design thinking, even, practical design skills, right through to those that might be a little bit heavy on the strategy side. What we found in the past is that there tends to be generally a group of students that are a bit mature in design here. So for those of you that feel a little bit green, it might be still a little bit of a stretch, but look, it's going to be a stretch for anyone taking this subject anyway, because it is that fast paced and it is quite rapid. So the way that structures that we do are a little bit more on the side of strategy and thinking, more with a little bit more of that business mindset, just because we find that in a lot of design subjects and courses that tends to be a little bit lacking, particularly the practicalities of actually how do you do strategy in practice. So if you've taken the service design subject or even context, you may have been exposed to a lot of the methods in design. So during prototyping, you know, storyboarding or journey maps and things like that, which you will get the opportunity to do in this subject. We're just not going to spend so much time on exploring how to do that. It's more for the case of, you know, fleshing out ideas and as a communication mechanism. So that being said, I will give a little bit of background on myself. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been taking the subject for the last 3 years. I also taught at Swinburne, and I've been teaching probably since 2012, so what is that, 8 years now. But in terms of my career, I've pretty much stayed in design throughout, you know, my entire career. I actually started out in my undergraduate in film, and then took an elective in graphic design, and then transitioned through there. So, you know, through my master's, I did sustainability design, which is quite interesting because it's kind of made a resurgence now into design strategy and systems thinking. Back then, that was probably where most of the strategy in design came from, which was around climate change and, you know, those sorts of subjects. And then from that, developed into service design. So practiced a lot in not only graphic design, but service design. Went and did a PhD in design thinking. So for those of you who want to torture yourself, that is available online. It's much more exploring design in complex environments. So it does take on a little bit more of that strategic systemic level. And that's where I sort of came into teaching in academia, and then exiting out of that, working in Deloitte. You know, that's also, I've seen a few familiar faces here. So Anthony was also previously there as a designer. I was in the customer strategy and insights practice, which is essentially pretty much mashing together Deloitte Digital, which is the design essentially function, with the strategy function of Monitor. So sort of really honing more the strategic skills through Deloitte. And then from there, just pretty much exited into NAB, worked with Brendan briefly at NAB as well. And I currently head up the consumer experience design team. So I'm the head of in that space, where actually, you know, what I do in my day-to-day is pretty similar to a lot of, you know, the case studies that you would be exploring in terms of the issues that we deal with. It's definitely, you know, a merge of design and strategy that we sort of work with on the daily. So I'm hoping that those of you who may have done a bit of the pre-reading, whether it be the package or the business cases, you might relate to some of those topics, or you might be familiar with some of these issues. So definitely have a think about that. I'm going to touch back at the end of this shoot around what you're hoping to get out of this subject. So maybe just keep that in the back of your minds as I talk through kind of the key bit of logistics here. So I might just go over briefly around the first assignment, so the A1 assignment, which I'm just going to bring up on my other screen here. So on Canvas, you would see that there's the 3 assignments that are outlined there. A1 and 2 are largely working documents, and they're all working to build up to your A3, which is your final assignment, which is essentially going to take the form of a formal, let's say, report document. So this would be something that you would create as if you were handing over to your stakeholder or to your clients, whichever position you might want to take in your mind. But it should be written in a way that you're actually making a report of recommendations. So it's not a working document. That being said, all your working material will be, can be contained in an appendix in that document, or it can be contained in a separate working document as well. So one of the key things that I'm really going to be looking for when I'm going through these assignments is your actual mental workings on top of actually completing the task. So a lot of strategies around making decisions and making trade-offs between decisions and articulating why you've kind of made those decisions. So it relies quite heavily on this element of critical thinking and analysis, which I'm really going to want to see in the annotations that you make in your 2 working documents. So for A1, business research, which is largely about exploring the business case that you're, you know, looking to do for the rest of the subject, looking at doing a bit of background research on that particular business, and actually, you know, pulling together some of your insights whilst working through some of the key activities that are outlined, and annotating why you've chosen what you've chosen and why you haven't chosen certain things. So to go over at a high level view of what's expected into A1, the 1,500 words is largely around diagrams and annotations. So like I said, for A1 and A2, it's working documents. So I'm looking for, you know, written sort of sentences around the key deliverables in it. So you will be looking at creating perhaps a draft business model canvas using the Lean business model canvas. You'll be annotating in that. You'll be annotating around why you chose some things. So yeah, like I said, it's a working document. So some of the key elements that you can, that are largely expected in A1, but if you're seeing some of the packages, some activities are optional. So it'll say choose one or choose between a list, and you can articulate why you've chosen one or another. But broadly, we're going to do largely a little bit of a design audit, you know, sort of looking at what is design in this organization. Can you gather information around how mature it is, as well as tossing up between whether to do a business model canvas and another activity, which is outlined in the first package. So then we also go into looking at where the business is looking to improve, where do you think they're needing to improve? So you're doing a bit more of that analysis of its current state, depending on how deep and how far you want to go, because we have such a differing level of expertise here. One of the key things that we recommend often, particularly with strategic analysis, is looking at annual reports. Now, we're not expecting of you to actually analyze, you know, any of the balance sheets and income statements and things like that. Like the financials is, if you want to go into that and do a deep analysis and say, this is what it's telling me, that's fine. But largely the annual report generally contains a lot of strategic information about the business and where they're hoping to go. So that's sort of one of the, you know, the key artifacts that we'd want to see you actually dig into and pull out as kind of where you're going to exercise that critical thinking. Then we also kick off a little bit around the customer research. So this will be broadly a little bit of secondary research here as well. So here we've got, you know, sort of general market research, looking at who they're basically targeting at the moment in that particular business. And, you know, essentially, you know, looking at the target segment and making recommendations or having an initial idea of whether that segment is appropriate or whether they should be looking at perhaps maybe something else in adjacency. Again, sort of really stressing the point that this is all early thinking that's going to evolve as you continue uncovering more information, and that is the whole point. What you're going to do in A1, you should not think is actually set in stone. Some stuff you might say, okay, I'm comfortable enough with what I've learned that I'm going to keep it that way, but you might uncover information in A2, which you might then go, actually, I think the vision statement that I created in A1 is probably not super appropriate, I'm going to tweak it. And that is the whole intention, because a lot of A2, which I won't go into now, but is looking at customer research, and that definitely will help inform and shape and iterate the actual direction that the business should look at, the vision statement or mission statement, and the key principles that you're going to create as well. So that's at a high level pretty much what you're looking at for A1. It's very much focused on the business and understanding the business, what they're trying to achieve, where they're trying to go, looking at the current market, you know, segmentation and where you think that they're focusing. And then A2 is very much looking at a lot of the customer research and sort of bringing more of those design elements into the equation. And then A3 is essentially pulling together that final document, which is essentially your final report. So I'm going to pause a little bit there and just check that everyone's sort of had a quick look at what's expected, at least for package 1 or for A1. Has anyone had a look and had any burning questions so far? I'm going to take deafening silence as a no. No, someone's sort of, Tim, you're kind of, nope.
I was thinking, sorry, no burning questions, no.
Okay. So has anyone had a chance to maybe have a read over any of the initial articles that were outlined in package 1? One's obviously written by me, another one I've included, which is from CBS Insights, which is a bit more of a strategic primer. Not yet? Yep, Livy?
I read the one by you, Stephanie. I haven't had a look at the other one yet. And was there a HBR one in there as well? Or am I dreaming that? Yeah, I read that one as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Any initial thoughts on those readings to share with the group, or understandings, interpretations?
No, well, to blow your trumpet, I actually really loved the breakdown of the definition of strategy, because I think that's where a lot of people struggle. And the fact that you pulled out the keywords is just a really nice pathway to follow if you're new to this, I think. So I actually really enjoyed it because I thought it was really succinctly written and just a really good start. Let's start there with a definition because so many people get confused by what it is.
Great, which is a good segue into the next discussion that I kind of wanted to open up.
You're welcome.
Just rightly, there's no right or wrong answers here, so whatever you think is an answer, please just yell it out. But what do you feel, you being the group, is what defines strategy? So there's a lot of things, you know, I've sort of outlined it predominantly in a basic way in the Medium article, but there's a lot more to it that you could add. Just want to get everyone's views on what they feel strategy is and what does it include.
I think at a very basic level of strategy is having a vision of an outcome where you want to go, a goal, and then steps that adapt to a survey that you've done prior, and based on that knowledge you create the steps of how you think you're going to get to that outcome.
Great. Anyone else want to build on that?
I'll build on that because I also think in there is a plan and approach based on the problem space that's being presented to you, knowing that the outcome may not be tangible yet when you're going into strategy work. You have an idea, but sometimes things change so significantly that your plan and approach, you need to be able to pivot really easy on that. So if you have an idea in your head on how you'd like to go about it and what you think the end goal is, that's a good base from which to start.
Excellent. I feel like there are other people who might have some ideas. Cameron?
It sets the ship. It's like it sets the direction for the ship. You know, to keep it, I suppose, to put a metaphor to it.
Awesome.
I guess if I was to think about our strategy, the strategy I've not long done, it would be all of those things that everybody else has said, but also there are some truths that that set the way, almost like a current state, so that you can get to that future state with your approach and your whatever. You know, you need to acknowledge where you are at the moment as well.
Sorry, Catherine, are your little video screens off the edge of, I think, off my screen? So I didn't see you actually in the group of people here. I have to
sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's Zoom on the iPad. You didn't get to do your introduction, so maybe I'll just take the opportunity now to have a little bit of intro from you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm suffering post-holiday, no food in the house, so I had to do an emergency run. So what do you want to know about me?
Just a little bit around your experience in design and strategy.
Cool. Okay, so I'm Kat. I work at the City of Casey, and I have been working in design for at least the last 3 years. So going into 4 years, I guess, this year. Sorry, just catching up. And last year, I wrote the City of Casey's customer experience strategy. So I currently work in the customer experience team. I wrote the City of Casey's customer experience strategy, and I wrote that, I guess, using a design methodology. So just my research base was 1,500 lines of customer feedback, and then kind of synthesized and analyzed that to come up with the strategy as it exists at the moment. That's probably my biggest strategic piece of work. Yeah, it was really fun, even if it did take a really long time.
Anything you learned about strategy in doing that piece of work that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the most important thing, probably the most important thing was bringing people along on the journey. So involving as many people as we possibly could, from people who might not touch your strategy on a daily basis. So for us in a council environment, during our early workshops, I made sure we had people from things like maternal and child health and that kind of thing, all the way through to executive and that level of buy-in, because you want to make sure that even you don't get blindsided in any kind of executive meetings. So it gives it a chance to kind of iron out those things in a more informal setting, and just gives them the chance to feel like they've owned it as well.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in before I pick on a new person? We're going to go through all of you. Okay.
I just wanted to, can I add something? Sorry to butt
Yep.
in. Like with regards to what people are saying about an outcome or a future state, I kind of think a good strategy, like it creates the environment where you can get to a desired future state, but it shouldn't dictate a particular outcome. That flexibility should be worked into a strategy.
Yep, awesome.
Really? Are you creating, when you're talking about creating flexibility, does that then allow the business to go in different directions, or by articulating a strategic direction, are you giving the business certainty about where they'll end up by adopting the strategy?
I don't know. I don't have any practical experience in it, like in terms of business leadership. I guess in terms of design, strategic design on a project by project basis, then yeah, I do think that there should be some flexibility so that whatever the outcomes are in the best interests of the, you know, overall goals of the business, rather than saying that this has to be a specific outcome.
I think that in an ideal world, I agree, like we would have flexibility and be able to constantly reassess, and that's kind of at the essence of design thinking, right? To be able to complete your sort of cycle and then go back to an earlier step in the process, and then start that again and keep refining and refining. I think in my experience, getting in a commercial world, getting leadership teams across the line on beginning to go through the strategic process, you kind of need to lead them with a tangible carrot that ends up being that kind of outcome. And I think that, so from a commercial point of view, having something that feels solid to the people who are going to invest in you, that's quite important. But I agree, if we could just be like, we don't know where we're going to go, but it's going to be good, that sort of thing.
Any additional thoughts to that, Brendan?
I've missed being in class with you, India.
Love you, Brendan.
We're doing a piece of work at work at the moment, which is one of the very first times that I've ever been at an organisation who's using design to drive corporate strategy, and it is completely groundbreaking. Basically, I've been at organisations that have product strategies. These are the products that we want to sell in the future, or this is how many things we will sell. Now, designers go and build those products so that people will buy them. Actually using design to come up with a future state that the organisation will be in 3 years is amazing. So we're actually looking at, as an organisation, we've got a company purpose. We've got some statements around risk, around the types of experiences we want to be delivering for people. And then we've actually said, okay, in 3 years' time, who do we want to be as an organisation based on all the current pain points we've got? Let's make sure we address those. And then who are we as an organisation? And then actually using that to work backwards on what's the investment, what's the investment things, that's the technical name, for them in the next 3 years, so that we'll actually get to that end state. And it's amazing, but it's also a really big double-edged sword, because I've kind of been banging on about this for my career, and now all of a sudden we're doing it. And I'm like, oh, we better deliver.
Shay, did I say your name properly this time?
Yes, you did.
Awesome.
I
Thoughts?
mean, for me, it's just probably from where I'm coming from, you have an end point or an end goal that you want, and then the strategy is the points that you're going to use to get there in this really simplistic kind of way. And that way, for us, everybody knows where we're heading. So that's probably my level of strategicness, I guess.
Tim, how about you?
Yeah, I think I actually land on in terms of preference or kind of how I think about in kind of Ali's camp in terms of trying to keep things open. But I think if we're it's interesting to think about how we're talking about or what we kind of consider an outcome. If we're saying we should be at a certain outcome, then is that actually is that outcome like we should have a specific product that we should be selling, or a specific metric that we should have, or is it more like we should be hitting these principles along the way, which I think is important, because like it doesn't matter how great your strategy is, there's always going to be, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the nose, right? So and everyone's going to get punched in the nose. So I think I don't have a lot of experience kind of guiding strategy for a business, or no experience, but I think there's a lot of moving parts there. So I think I'm interested to find out kind of how that works and it overlaps with the design. Just a question on this. When we talk about design strategy, this is like really basic stuff, but are we talking about strategy for design within an organization, or are we talking about design influencing strategy of an organization?
That is an awesome question, and I'm so glad you asked it.
Okay.
What do you think would be the answer to that?
Well, having a look at the three business case studies, one of them which I was drawn to, which is the Slack one, which is kind of design within an organization. So the strategy of design, is kind of what I'm interested in at the moment with the organization I work for. But another one which has come up, and to kind of Brendan's point, I've heard a lot of designers over the years talking about how design has so much to offer in terms of influencing the strategy and getting ahead of those decisions and being at the table. So yeah, both.
What does everyone else think? Is it both? Is it one or the other? What are your thoughts or experiences so far?
Both.
Yep. Some nods here. Yep. Anthony, we haven't got your take on strategy yet. Do you want to give your view?
I think it's more around just setting a foundation. I think it works both. Sorry, I got these things noise cancel, and I feel like I'm talking inside my head, so this is better now. It's a bit of both, because you need to sort of lay down your foundation to sort of understand or take people on a journey of where you want to go or where you think the business should be going. And then if you have a plan, you can build through that or renovate if you want to talk more house components. The inside is essentially your internal, and then the wiring's how you're sort of moving around and where you're flowing through. And then essentially your external is how you build and what you look like for an external facing. So how you get people coming into your business as well. Without those initial drafts or those plans, you're setting up sort of essentially for not failure, but you're not essentially getting into the right direction. I know that there's two different ways where you can sort of do a business strategy or essentially a wider business strategy and understand where the future of the business will go. But sometimes what happens with a lot of your stakeholders, they'll give you a bunch of different things and say, this is the things that we want to do. Then you as a designer need to sort of step back and understand how you're going to strategically design these things or assess these things and say, all right, we're going to actually deliver these things first because these actually make sense together, and then move on through the other things as well. If that makes any sense.
Yep, makes perfect sense. Catherine, did you have any other thoughts before I sort of summarize a little bit of what everyone said so far?
No, I don't think so. I think everyone, I think it's all pretty good. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I still think, yeah, no, I'm absolutely hopeless. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. You can gather the thoughts, so you can share back maybe more at the end around what you're hoping to get out of this subject. But You know, I'm kind of apprehensive to say what's right or wrong, because strategy, like design thinking, it can be quite subjective. It, you know, evolves based on context. But if I were to broadly say what is correct or you know, generally in the right direction, is that it is both. And it's absolutely right what everyone's sort of like sort of nodding their heads towards, which is it can be something that you influence from the inside out or the outside in. You know, whether it's through being strategic with your team inside an organization or being strategic for the organization, for the business. And this is something which the Dark Matter and Trojan Horses book from Dan Hill really goes into to quite some depth. In prior iterations of the subject, that was one of the key reading materials. It definitely still is, but we don't probably refer to it in the packages as we move forward in this subject. And largely because that book is a little bit heavier theoretically, and it's more of a thought-provoking type of read, where he will propose sort of examples and questions around, you know, designing the thing to influence the organization, or design the organization to influence the thing. So sort of that meta to matter type of perspective. And he uses key phrases and references. Like, I don't know if anyone's read the book. Has anyone actually read that book before, or not yet? So it's a good one. I really recommend reading it anyway, just for your own design maturity. It'll help you really think in a deeper, more mature way as a designer, because it'll really open your mind towards that more systemic thinking type of approach, the scale of design. And this is kind of where, you know, design and strategy is so similar, because it does operate on 7 scales. And there will be artifacts that I will share along this subject to help sort of solidify what that means. You know, you can design something and be strategic on a very focused level, like UX strategy, which is very much about the thing that you're designing, the interface of that particular artifact. And you can move right up those levels through to service design, systemic, policy design. There's even now, you know, transition design, which is essentially like a global view of design, which you could argue all has elements of strategy in it, because strategy and being strategic can operate at all those different scales and levels as well, which is what makes it incredibly fuzzy, because there's no necessarily right or wrong way. You only really know if you're operating rightly or wrongly is how successful you are in the output and in the outcome. You know, design like strategy is only really best understood or you know, seen as being successful in its actual implementation. So the other thing that we're trying to do with this subject as well is that a lot of traditional strategy subjects in other universities or other types of courses will really talk a lot around the theory, how to do strategic planning in a way, but not necessarily strategic implementation, which is a lot of what strategy is starting to shift towards. So the days where you kind of would traditionally sit away, you know, in a room and develop a really nice, beautiful strategy in 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it might be, and then hand it to organization and goes, okay, prosper. It doesn't necessarily work as much like that in industry anymore. So we're finding a lot more that strategy is on the ground. It's, you know, enacted through almost like real-time implementation, and that, yes, you still will have a vision and a goal, and we'll work through that in this subject as well. You need something to anchor and set the foundations on and set the direction, which everyone kind of touched on in their answers. But it is much more, for use of a better word, agile nowadays. And that's just making it a hell of a lot more harder, because you're trying to sort of like link your strategic actions today with this future state and trying to fill that gap in between. So there's probably one thing that is somewhat fundamental to strategy that no one has touched on yet. And I didn't actually touch on it in the article that was linked to the first package, but it's quite an important element to strategy. And so I'll give you a clue, or the clue is probably inherent in the article, which links to the topic around strategy being born out of military. So what could you guess might be the missing element that we need to consider when we're thinking strategically?
Our opposition, our enemy.
Yep, exactly. So to really translate that into, you know, everyday kind of business terms, it's your competitive advantage. How are you going to be competitive? What decisions are you going to make that will make your organization or your design competitive? And like what, you know, Tim referenced around, it can be within the organization with your team as well as for the business. You can be competitive in both ways. So what I mean by that is there's a little diagram or sort of sketching how to actually articulate this. And I might actually just post a rough sketch to Slack at some point in the week, and hopefully that'll start a discussion. But strategic design will have, most often in most cases, the designer's agenda and the business agenda. So initially I sort of had them as like a Venn diagram where the intersection is really design strategy. But often you'll find that in practice, you have the designer's agenda in that, as a designer, how can I be strategic with the people around me to kind of push my agenda, to push the purpose of design, to make sure that we're developing a design-led organization, versus how do I need to put on strategic thinking and a strategic approach in the artifact or the initiative or the project that I've been put on to help the business be competitive. So you sort of got the strategy for myself, kind of selfishly, or for my team, and then the strategy for the business. And you're often bouncing between the two, and the two often coexist together. So hopefully you would have recognized that a little bit, as mentioned in the business cases. Some will dial up whether it's being strategic for your own team in the business, or whether it's being strategic for the business, and at varying scales as well. So also to add on that, as a little forewarning, there is going to be a pivot in this subject. So it's something that tends to throw people. It's intended to throw you. It's intended to be very hard. It's intended to come at the very last minute. It's meant to be that annoying stakeholder that comes in, or client, and they're just like, oh, we've decided to change things now. Can you just kind of like rework that into your plan? It's to simulate real life scenarios, as I mentioned, earlier. So a pivot is coming. I'm not going to tell you when it's coming, but it's coming. And it may or may not shake up what you had proposed to do thus far. But it is something to just keep in the back of your mind. One other tip that I might also give you is take a look at the A3 assignment and the way it's structured. If you want to try and maximize the efficiency of your time so that you don't have a lot of rough workings, and then all of a sudden at A3 you're like, oh crap, I need to actually create a formalized document. Some people will start to actually pull together the rough structure of that final document and fill it out as they go through the A1 and A2. So you might start to think about actually filling in those gaps in that framework now, if you want to save yourself time from then having to develop this kind of nicer looking report at the end. Some people have worked that way as well, and that tends to save a little bit of time. What else do I need to cover here? Does anyone else have any further thoughts around, oh, actually, sorry, before I get to that, the other two key readings, Beyond Dark Matter and Trojan Horses from Dan Hill, which I recommend anyway, just for your design careers to read. The two books we probably refer to most often, aside from a lot of articles that you'll find from the internet that are attached, is Strategic Design from Gerda Gemser and Ingo Karpen. I have the book here, but I have to run around from where I'm sitting to grab it. I can show you if you want to see it. And the other one is Understanding Design Thinking, Lean and Agile by Johnny Schneider. Johnny's book is actually quite practical. That's the reason why I've included it. There's a lot of practical tools that he talks through and how to implement them. So we'll be referring to that a little bit because he has some nice tools and templates and examples. Strategic Design is there because it's probably one of the few books that actually exist called Strategic Design, which again highlights the fact that this is a very new field for design. It's probably getting close to the full, self-realization of the design field. We kind of worked from, graphic design and traditional, artifacts-based design through to service design, and now service design has kind of really evolved into strategic design, which might be a topic for another shoot discussion. Where do you draw the line between service and strategic design, for example? But that's one of the few books, and dare I say kind of seminal books actually in this subject. So you're all still quite new, as in this subject and this field is quite new. It's still evolving. You're all helping it to evolve as well. So through your thinking and through the work that you'll be doing in this subject, you'll be contributing to the practice of strategic design to help solidify it as a practice. I keep iterating this as each year moves on, from what I've even learnt from the students and what I've observed. So it's definitely evolving, it's definitely fuzzy, and it's definitely going to be a very fast-paced and difficult subject. Maybe easy for some of you, but there's a lot of work. I'm just going to check the chat here because I've got some chat messages. Catherine, Cameron. I think there's probably an element of descriptivism versus prescriptivism here. What do we define as future state? Cameron, do you want to touch on some of your notes here?
Sure. Descriptivism and prescriptivism comes from linguistics, which is a very unusual just hobby reading that I do. So prescriptivism is where it's a language that's quite prescribed. So French, there's a few other ones around where they'll say, this word is French, this word isn't. I sort of like to put that in a design context. If there's a strategy that sort of says, this is where we want to be in 10 years time, and it says, we're going to do this by doing this, this, and this, was prescribing that outcome. Whereas something that could just describe that as the outcome, to say, in 10 years time, we're going to be in a situation where we have this, this, and this, but only describing that outcome rather than actually prescribing it. But yeah, bringing it back to that sort of connection was what I was sort of going for there.
Great. I'm just going to check my little chat again and make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so for in India, for your sake, I saw your chat message there. I will post the key readings to Slack as well, just as a reminder with the names of the people, because I don't think the actual name for the strategic design book is in the package. So I'll post those on Slack so you have it there as a reference. What else did I want to cover today as part of our little introduction? Really, it was just sort of covering A1 summary, getting to know you guys, diving into a little bit around what you think strategy is. So in the last roughly 10 minutes that we have, does anyone want to share what they would like or what they're expecting to learn out of this subject and what they're hoping to get out of this subject? Come on, don't make me pick. Okay, Tim.
Yeah, so I'm looking, so in my current role, I'm looking to expand the role of design and also help the business kind of leverage the value of design. So whether that's kind of helping people use design thinking, or allowing designers to be part of the decision-making process and the strategic process. So it looks like I've got a good chance of getting that out of this course, which is cool.
India.
Pardon me, sorry. What do I want to get out of this subject or the project? Guess I haven't yet been in a commercial space where I've done a project on an actual client in terms of auditing and trying to offer substantial design solutions or interventions, not in a real life corporate situation, only in study situations. So I'd quite like to just get more experience because I'd like to work in that area, and I'm a bit nervous about how to make that shift from where I am.
Awesome. Anybody else want to chime in?
I will. So for me, every subject from now on is a chance to experiment towards my research project, to be honest. So I'm a bit strategic in what I'm choosing because this is my 5th subject and I really only have one formal subject to go and then one subject of my own creation. So before I do my research project. So my topic is about storytelling and empathy. So I'm going towards the lift example because I think it's going to provide the most interesting approach for me and allow me to learn a few things to help me towards my exegesis.
Great. Okay, Anthony.
I just want to get good. No, I've got a real interest in more the strategic space in design. I've been slowly doing it, but I just want to learn more and sort of get better at it. And I think it'll help me out as well, becoming a better leader as well. Understand that if I have a small team, I can sort of plan a really lean strategy and sort of move on with that as well, and actually set a direction for either a business unit or a business moving forward as well.
Cool. Let's hear from one of probably the more experienced participants we have. Brendan, what are you hoping to get out of this?
I'm actually really looking forward to doing a lot of the theory that sits behind the action. A lot of my knowledge in design has come about because I've been in organisations that have done things. And so I've done a lot of on-the-job learning. I'm really interested in, just getting a lot more into why we do the things that we do, what's the theory that sits behind them, and what's the... I actually love the anecdotes as well, because then when I'm back in an organisation, I can be talking about, well, do you know why we should be doing something? It's because historically it was done like this. Now organisations are doing it like this, and this is the outcomes that we're getting. So it makes me more effective then as a practitioner.
So you would probably really enjoy the Dark Matter and Trojan Horses book. Dives a little bit more deeper into how and the why we do things. I'm also going to rely on you to trigger those conversations as well. Because sometimes
excellent.
We do end up sometimes diving into the practicalities, but it is good to sort of pull back and say, okay, let's actually look at it from a more meta perspective, and what's the theory, driving behind these decisions and the history. So that'd be awesome.
Cool.
Cameron, did we cover you already?
Nope. No. I suppose I come from a sector that's, to be brutally honest, does not do design well. Anybody who's had to use enrollment and online will know that for certain. So being able to take that and put that into practice in my work here, because it is something that the sector dearly needs. So yeah.
Awesome. Ali.
I don't really know that I have anything unique to add to that other than what other people have already said that they want to get out of the unit. I'm just interested to learn more from everyone else in the group.
Cool. Who else have I missed? Catherine?
So I think going back to somebody else's answer, maybe, so I'm a bit like Libby, so this is my kind of third to last subject. But also in government, we love a good strategy. We love them. They're like air for us. So I just want to make sure that as I'm both designing my future strategies and also creating design strategies, that I'm, just kind of doing it in a way that is best practice and that I know has been evaluated, or, I've had everybody else's input to see how they've done it, because I think that's one of the most valuable things in this course is getting to learn from how everybody else does things. I've got a lot out of that. So yeah, probably just kind of picking everybody else's brain as well.
Awesome. Have I missed anyone? India, did we cover you? Yep. Did anyone else? Did I miss anyone? I'm losing track of my screens here. Nope, all covered. Libby?
You did talk to me, but I have a conundrum for you, which goes on Kat's point. Kat and I are quite like-minded on this. But government, especially federal, don't think they have competitors. So that's a constant struggle for me as someone who's come from a consulting background and now working in government, is that they don't believe they compete with anyone. So you're like, well, how can you be better at what you do, and how can you try new things, and how can you shine when really they just look and go, well, we just do what we do. So I'll just let that one sit with you, because it's I struggle with it constantly. They think they have peers, but they don't think they have competitors.
I've got kind of half an answer for you, Libby.
Good.
So for me, I think, and it could be a bit different for you, but I think our competitor in local government is compliance. So we want our customers, well, not all of the time, but majority of the time we're asking them to do something, pay something, etc., etc. So if they don't do that, we don't get the money to do whatever else. So that's our competitor in that. And then on the flip side, if we don't meet our legislative and statutory requirements, then we aren't complying with what's required of us. And so we don't get the same level of funding. And so that's often what I think of our competitor. But I think that works in a local government context, but I'm not as sure in yours. It's different.
Yeah.
That actually touches really well on what I was also wanting to end on as a more probably a meta thing to think about, given recent unfortunate disastrous events, which I'm sure you all know what I'm alluding to, and how design strategy might play into things that we've seen and experienced, with the bushfires. So to touch on the topic of competitiveness with the government, and how to keep that relevance for, say, that particular context. What I mentioned earlier was around competitive advantage. You could take competition out of that and maybe just focus on advantage. And how does advantage play when maybe you don't have direct competitors, but how can you be advantageous depending on scale as well? And I might sound like I'm being cryptic here, but it's one to think about when we think of, for example, the issues around climate change and things like that. Which is definitely a scale issue and has been discussed in literature around design strategy and design systems or systems thinking. So we have only 3 minutes to go. Does anyone want to end on a happier note than what I have? But it's one to think about as maybe a topic of conversation for later tutes. How does scale play into design strategy? But does anyone else want to end on anything before we wrap it up? Nope. Okay. First class is always a bit shy. I think you're all warm up by the next one, or I'll just hammer you with really hard questions and make you talk. Alrighty, well, as I mentioned, I'll be on Slack. I tend to lurk throughout the week, have it on every single device that I possibly could own, so I'm fairly omnipresent. But I do have dedicated times on Sunday where I will be online, just sitting there waiting to answer any questions. It's either going to be Sunday morning around 11 to 12 or afternoon around 5 to 6, depending on kind of what's for you guys and for me. But that's generally the times I tend to be on. I'll let you know probably either Friday or the day before what time I'll be around. But otherwise, I will be sharing additional articles and links, and hopefully we can kick off a discussion on Slack because that is part of the course structure. And other than that, I look forward to the discussion next week. Alrighty, nice to meet you all and see familiar faces again. I'll see you online.